Hey everybody, instead of our regular episode this week, we're excited to share something different. We've transformed our three-part series on Agentic AI into a comprehensive keynote presentation that we gave during our AI Engage Summit this Tuesday. And it dives into how this technology is revolutionizing higher education.
That's correct. And in this keynote, Ardis and I explore the complete journey from understanding agentic frameworks to implementing multi-agent systems to building an AI workforce for you, your institution, the colleges and friends that we have. It's specially designed for enrollment, marketing, student success leaders looking to harness these powerful technologies.
Whether you followed our three-part series as part of the podcast, or this is your first introduction to Agentic AI, the keynote provides actionable insights and practical implementation strategies. So we really hope that you find it valuable for your institution as you go through the journey or that AI journey in 2025 and beyond. Now let's dive into the Agentic AI revolution in higher education. So what we're going to do today is actually we're going to go back and forth between us. We have a bunch of slides that kind of going to take us through or going to be anchor points, but JC and I will try to go back and forth quite a bit around this. So look, why does this matter right now? We have hit home many, many times how students and the customer expectation is increasing. They expect this intelligent, personalized experiences. And this hasn't changed, right? It's been, of course, AI is accelerating that expectation. They can go now on any AI, chatbot, and they can, they're expecting intelligence to come out from your communications, from your interactions, from institutions' interactions. And then, of course, on the other side, like higher ed, like we're facing unprecedented efficiency and personalization demands as well, right? So there's this gap that's being created for quite a while around how AI, or essentially like how we don't have enough staff and how we're not able to meet those expectations. When you look at it from the where we live today and where we are today, AI is no longer just a tool, right? And you think about the expectation of what's happening in the market, how fast things are going, what the products are that are being introduced. It's really becoming a teammate. I don't think I can expect, I don't think I can do what I do today without AI just because it's been such an integral tool of my in my toolbox. So I don't look at it as a tool anymore. I really look at it as a teammate, as a collaborator. So it's no longer that tool. And then last but not least, it's like, why does this matter? And if you're here today, you're seeing how early adopters will gain significant competitive advantage. You saw it back when the digital transformation happened in institutions, moving from paper to digital and moving your processes online and so on and so forth. You saw how fast institutions and what the ROI was. Well, it's the same thing right now, but the time frame has condensed. So someone else, if you're moving in this direction, and if you're here as an early adopter, there will be significant competitive advantage against your other institutions or even other folks in the market as well. As you're an individual contributor, you're going to be able to be much more favorable in terms of getting that job, getting that promotion, and so on and so forth.
All right, Ardis. So everybody, what we like to have is this conversation in three parts. Our first part, in a way, summarizes an episode in which we unpacked agentic AI. And it's a really important foundational piece of knowledge as we're going to have this conversation in a cumulative way. Our second part of this presentation is going to be what happens when you have multi-agents collaborating. And then towards the third part of this presentation, we're going to put it all together and try to think ahead of us, specifically 5 years from now, on how the AI workforce common emerges. So let's start with foundational knowledge. Agentic AI, what is it? But more importantly, where does it come from? Ardis, you and I have been in this sector for quite some time, and perhaps we
Yeah.
didn't use the word machine learning or data science or AI back in the day, but there's been a very, very interesting acceleration of AI that everyone talks about, and it's called generative AI, circa 2022. But there's a leg, there's a kind of a precursor of where that
Yeah.
comes from and obviously where we are today. So I know you love talking about this chart, and I think it captures
Yeah.
this spirit of the evolution of AI, and specifically for you listeners and everyone in this webinar today. We have been doing this for quite some time. It just today we're talking about
Yeah.
a very important milestone in AI. So give us the
Yeah.
evolution timeline here.
Yeah, so JC, when you were so this is if you see the little guy over there at the Perception AI right on the bottom, so that's Jensen Wang, that's NVIDIA. So this is a screenshot from the NVIDIA keynote at Consumer Electronics Show this January. So this was in CES, and I wanted to include that in here because it's really really good around how we think about these computing platforms and how we think about AI kind of fitting in. You see 2012, it's called AlexNet. So of course you're not a geek or you're not, you don't know about that. Like this is the start when we took this neural network architecture, this
Hmm.
deep learning, right? So essentially unsupervised, what we call unsupervised, essentially throw a whole lot of data at the AI and then just let it figure out patterns, right? And AlexNet was the first one where you now could prove that you throw a whole bunch of images at it and it's able to categorize images and understand images. If you remember, it used to be that, the hot dog, categorizing hot dog versus an actual dog, one of those. So, or like a Chihuahua versus a muffin, right? You've seen those memes back in the day. So that
Probably the
started
meme
AlexNet. So
is it a
that
cat or not? Is it a cat or not?
is
And
it a
not
cat or
getting
not?
the cat, right?
Right. Exactly. But that's where it started was deep net. So perception AI, that was perception AI. We started with speech recognition, deep kind of this medical imaging. So we figured out like how do we understand the world? How do we perceive the world? So this models, right? This models began to understand the world because we gave it a lot of data. And the next phase, then it became around generating data. So now they learned how they perceive the world, they understand the world. Now they need to generate and communicate back and forth. This is where generative AI came around, right? We saw it with obviously before ChatGPT came around. There's models like GPT-1 and 2 and 3 and so on and so forth. But this now started the digital marketing and content creation. We start thinking about ChatGPT and you start thinking about image generation. So AI, this AI models, and that's a generative AI mode. So until last year, we were in that phase. We were, from a consumer perspective, 2022 to 2024, end of it, it was the generative AI age. Well, we move along from that, and now AI is starting to communicate back with us, right? It's starting to actually take actions on its own, and that's where we get into the agentic world of agentic AI, and that's what we're going to talk about today in 2025 and going forward. And then the last one is physical AI, when AI starts to understand the world, right? So perception, understand it, communicate back and forth. It's able to take actions, but then it's able to take actions in the physical world as well. So like self-driving cars or robotics, and that's kind of the next phase, and that's happening in parallel. And that's where you guys were talking about your
Exactly.
dishwasher and laundry and all of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. As we go to the next slide, a really important um, misrepresentation of this graphic is that the first step, it looks like it's linear, that there is basically the same distance between all the steps. But just think about the first step is about 20 years. And from generative AI to agentic, we're talking about 2, 3 years. So this
Yeah.
physical AI, it would not be crazy to think about it very, very, very soon. But now, today's
Yeah.
conversation is about agentic AI, and it's a really important definition that, of course, we need to lead with. Now, there's going to be a lot of words here, and as Ardis and I walk through it, please understand that it's not important about the wordsmithing or the semantics of the definition, but understanding some of these components that generalize a LLM, which is basically this foundational work that gives us the smarts to do the generative AI, to the distinction that it has for being agentic LLM. So, Artis, let's start with the definition, and then we can go into the components here.
Yeah, so absolutely. So agentic AI really refers to AI that can, you know, they can act like an agent, right? So that's where the name comes from. Like an agent, you have agency, meaning that you can act on your own, you do things on your own. So it can take initiatives, makes decisions, carry out tasks on its own to achieve a particular goal. You really think about this as like a helpful assistant that doesn't just sit there and waits for your commands. And that's what generative AI has been all about. It's like you give it commands, and prompt engineering was really important. Well, no longer do you have to do that, right? That's kind of entering the agenda. You just give it a goal, say accomplish this, go book a ticket for me, or go schedule a meeting, or find this information, and then it's actually going in behind the scenes. So you don't have to do this crazy prompting and things like that. So at the core of it, an agent is an AI that acts and decides.
And as we think about the generalization of this, doesn't matter how we define it to be, right? It's just that there's really three important distinctions that make an agent. There will be reasoning, there will be adaption, and there will be acting. But artists, this is a whole podcast. This is probably what
Yeah.
2024 looked like for you on the left-hand side. There was a foundational type of work, aka the AI tech stack, that allows you to have brain skills in orchestration so you can reason, act,
Yeah.
and adapt. So before you go there, I want everybody to know that what the right-hand side tells us is that as I think about agentic AI, I'm thinking about a very advanced type of AI that is always going to be doing three things. It will reason because it has the capacity of reasoning. It will
Mhm.
adapt because it knows how to use context and all this information to make the right decision so that it can act, aka the agent framework. But the foundational aspect of the three components is based on a brain, a skill, and orchestration. Ardis, you want to do your quick recap of, I guess, 2024, 700 presentations that you probably did on this?
Yeah, no, of course. Look, you think about this, so you can kind of simplify this a little bit better. Like when you have generative AI, like this back and forth, like you talk about, like it's just one shot. You tell the model one thing and it comes back. But what makes agentic AI possible is this idea of a loop, right? So this is a loop. It's reasons, adapt, acts, and then figures out what happened, reasons again, adopts towards that goal. When we think what makes this possible is really this large language models, the reasoning or the brain, what we call large language models. And those language models have the ability for given a bunch of context, a bunch of information, and that's the memory part of it, to reason about that information. And then we can give it skills to say, okay, you can use this skills or tools. You can use this tool or you can use that tool, or you can reach out in different systems and you can accomplish different tasks. So we give it a set of tools. And then we start the orchestration component, meaning that once it's able to do something with the tool, we can start thinking about the ability for it to use these tools over and over again, or have specializations of different systems where they have different tools and they have different contexts, and that's the orchestration component of it. So that's essentially, those are the three core kind of principles, or three bases, and then you have the reasoning, the acting, and then the adopt or the action on the other side.
There's a very,
JC, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that part of it on the right hand
of,
side?
of course, please go ahead and let me prime you with this. There's a very logic, human-like aspect here, reasoning, adaptation, and acting. Think about it. Hey, what's your name? Ardis. That was just basically something really quick. Hey, Ardis, what's your birth date, right? So all of a sudden, what is happening in my brain, I need to start basically creating these adaptations because I don't remember those. And my reasoning in my adaptation, so I
Hmm.
can come and give you an answer, starts basically going through this cycle. And this is the cyclical aspect of it. Obviously, I just prompt me with very simple statements, but this is where it becomes very interesting. And if you think about it, it's human-like. Artist, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so we'll take it from the reasoning part, right? And I explained it just a little bit, but the systems can understand complex tasks. They
Mm-hmm.
can break them down into kind of manageable steps. For example, like you mentioned, but like we have an example can be an agentic system that you can take a request like create a campaign for our new MBA program targeting working professionals, right? And it understands all the components needed to fulfill that request. So it breaks that down into oh, okay, I need to create a campaign. I need to break this down into like who the audience is
Hmm.
and what kind of messaging do they need. And it's, you know, so it's reasoning through the different steps. What does it take to create a good campaign? So it breaks all those things down. Do I create an outline first? Do I go get messaging? Do I do all these things? The adoption part is beyond just executing the rules. The systems can adopt based on new inputs that are coming in or changing of circumstances, right? Because or feedback that you give it. So in this particular approach, it's you know isn't working. They can pivot and try alternative strategies. So this adoption is really important because as you're you know that campaign, perhaps it's not really targeted. So you want to add more context, or he understands that oh, okay, today is you know is the weekend, so I'm not going to create an email to send out today. I'm going to change it. I'm going to do it another day. Or the administrator who asked for that is actually changing and providing feedback to modify that for a specific kind of context or for a specific area. And then the last one is the action, right? So this is the most important thing. This is what makes agentic is really the action part. It's able to act independently. Finally, it's the systems can interact with almost any existing tools and platforms. So in our case, Element, like we build this on top of our platform, so we have the benefit of doing that. And they don't just provide recommendations, right? But they can actually do the work. They can send the emails, they can update the records, and they can schedule events and much more. And then really together, those capabilities kind of create the AI systems and functions like teammates and other tool, that have other tools and so on and so forth. So
Artist,
I don't know. Did I explain that correctly, or do you think
I
that's
think
enough?
I'll give you a B plus on that.
All right.
Uh,
Can
but
I?
with this question, I think you can take it to an A. I think Ryan has a really interesting point here, and it's literally situated around what is traditional versus this framework and components we're talking about.
Yeah.
So his question,
Yeah.
what additional technical considerations or solutions are required for agentic AI versus traditional? Chatbot, chatbot that isn't acting as an agent, making decisions and taking actions. So, artists,
Yeah.
can you just basically do a quick recap of what is a chatbot not doing that is agentic AI yet, traditional, but it doesn't do this reasoning act, adaptation and act?
Yeah, so you have the traditional chatbot. It's basically answering questions back and forth, and
Hmm.
you
Acting
ask it a
probably, right?
question. Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, we don't really fit it into this method, but it reasons and then it gives you an answer back, right? Whereas, so that's a traditional chatbot. It gives you an answer back. Now, you can say that some of these systems go a little bit further than that, so they can think about this as agentic. If you say, are they using tools, right? If they're using a tool, like one of the tools can be go get some information from the website or go do some searching and go reach out in the system and get information about the person. So that research component can be agentic because it's reasoning on what the user is asking for. It's thinking, oh, I need to go get something. It goes and gets that thing. It reasons about that. It does something in the background. It provides that back. So even chatbot, the traditional ones, doesn't do that reasoning or doesn't work with those background tools.
Hmm.
A new AI agent chatbot does that. But also further than that, it can go ahead and do things like if I ask it for an application or an event, it will actually go ahead and do that work and register you for that event and actually sign up for that application or start that application or and so on and so forth. So that's the difference there between that chatbot and an agent.
Love that. Um, What we'd like to do next is, in a way, demystify these framework components with three examples. Let me stop sharing and reshare again because I don't think I hit the sound option and it's not allowing me to do it, but we can talk about it. Uh,
Yeah.
in the next examples, you start basically seeing I need to take my ears off. You start seeing how this Artist, would you mind
Yeah.
commenting on it? Because I'm hearing the audio.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries. So this is when Google Gemini 2, like this models, this large brains have become really, really interesting in their reasoning. And this is kind of what you start thinking about a research agent in here. So it's going out, it's thinking about what the task needs to be done, and then it's kind of taking multiple steps. And then you apply those agents to like the foundation is this models, but you apply those agents to different things. Like in this case, it's actually playing in a game, and this it's acting, it's looking at what's happening in the game, and then it's making recommendations in terms of what you need to do next. In some cases, it can actually act and actually do things in the game itself, right? So you can play those games, and again, you can look at the physical world and do exactly the same thing, where it can now control something physical like a motor or this hands in here. So the whole idea of this agentic um, AI or multimodal agents is that it understands the world in many, like through text, through audio, through video, through images. It's able to reason through, break tasks down, and then act on that world as well. So this is an example from Google and kind of why they think their Gemini 2 enables agentic, because they're really, really smart. You need these models to be extra smart in order to accomplish that. This is another one. If you're not familiar or if you haven't used this deep research, this is ChatGPT, and it's the pro version. So this is the $200 version of ChatGPT. And they have built an agent which is called deep research. So you ask it for a question. This is like a research assistant. So think about
Right.
this, like it's going out and you ask it a question, and then it's breaking down and saying, okay, I can do that for you. Give me some explanations. And then it goes out and starts to do that research for you. Think about like, asking it for, research the viability of having a nursing program for X school, do research on the competition, what's the viability, what's the ROI, all of that. So it goes out, it searches the internet, it comes back with information, it reasons through that, it breaks those tasks down, it does even more searches. So back and forth over this loop. And it can take up to minutes, 5, 6, 10 minutes sometimes in order to accomplish these things. So this is another agentic, and it's around AI, deep, we call deep research. If you haven't used this a deep research component, there is other tools like Perplexity, for example. They have that deep research. Gemini has introduced one with deep research, and then Grok as well have some of it as well. So this is becoming a de facto agent now for a lot of these, general chatbots.
All right. One more.
One more. This is one of my favorites. This actually just got
Hmm.
announced 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and it kind of hits home a little bit around higher ed, right? Because
A
JC
little
and I,
bit.
we went to yeah, a research institution, right? So JC, I mean, you have a PhD, right? So tell me about your process for getting that PhD and the research that you did, and how did it work out?
In this one, I can hear you because on the other ones, they were audio, so it was kind of hard to multitask. Yes, this is a special one because think about an experience of a classical graduate student. When it came to, let's say, build my dissertation, I would spend almost 90 days, 3 months just in a closet, dark room, reading papers to emerge to what is called the literature review, right? That grounds a original piece of work on academic knowledge that doesn't exist, and all of a sudden, like that proposal needs to be reviewed. These are the type of things that required hundreds of hours, dozens of days. And today, you start understanding that that's just basically one step of the entire research process. Because what happens after that, as you know, is that you have an idea. Now it's validated that there's
Yeah.
no knowledge against it. But then you have to start developing hypotheses. You start developing the research question. And all this machinery produces original research. Artists, and I know you're going to come and explain this, but everybody, think about
How
our
long did it take you to
research
do that?
from beginning to end, 5 years, right? But think
Wow.
about the process
How about the
of just
research part?
research. Yeah, the research part it was 2 years for me.
2 years.
And
Wow.
In 1 year, literally, I can say it took 3 years because 1 year I wasted it in a circular loop of not finding anything interesting. But the moment you latch on the topic, it was literally 2 years. And think about me, my journey, about 5 years, let's say 2 years in the production of original research. And they were in my, with my advisor, there were three of us. And this is a really interesting construct that this type of agentic framework breaks up in research intensive institutions. A tenure track faculty member will have multiple graduate assistants, PhD students, producing research to see what works. 3 years later,
Right.
one paper, three, four papers,
Yeah.
maybe that work. My topic didn't, get a Nobel Prize type of recognition,
It
but
wasn't
some
that
of
good,
them
huh?
do. But the point is the acceleration of it. It's really,
Yeah.
really interesting. So you want to take it from here, Artis?
Yeah, yeah. I was just trying to say like I don't know what your research was about, but do you mind sharing?
I I specialize in something that it was called Texas data because there was no NLP back in the day. So we wanted to understand from publications on strategic intent. So an organization comes and says, hey, I'm going to build this. I'm going to build that. And actually they go ahead and do it. So what you want to understand from the literature is what capabilities are demonstrated and you build because they're intentional versus they're not. My PhD is in information systems, meaning that you wanted to extract, in this case, 42,000 publications of kind of PR that organization is going to come and do it and look over time if the project were successful to look at the power of intent in organizational systems, specifically technology. So you need to build these tech extractors and classifiers. But remember, this is like, 2015, so there's no NLP as a
You
practice.
could
So
you could have
it's
just
it's
you could have just waited another 7 years and then just
I
so what do you
everybody,
so
everybody, I'm not joking. My PhD, 2 years of my life, could have been done with one of the deep research tokens that OpenAI has, because it's about combing 2 years worth of publications, in this case, press releases,
yeah,
and understanding what
yeah,
was successful, and then generate a framework behind it. So
yeah.
2 years over 2 minutes. I don't know
Two
if I
years
like
over
that
2 minutes.
comparison.
Jeez, I'm blowing your so remember last week or when we were on the last podcast, we talked about what did we say? 2 hours? No, half a day versus 30 minutes. No,
Yeah.
even longer than that. We're
The
trying to do
the we
the
have a
ICP model. Yeah.
Yes, with the context that is here, we did basically an experiment of having a traditional approach to fit a model, machine learning,
Hmm.
classical regression models. So my team, big shout out to Jamie Box, throws out a awesome model, but it took us 2 weeks, right? Multiple meetings
2 weeks.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
An artist took on the project using an operator, and it took him 2 minutes, right? And I'm sorry,
No,
took him
like
half
30
hour.
minutes, 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it took in half hour, and the cost of that is about $2 if you actually
$2.
generalize
Yeah.
$200 over 20 a week, a month that you get. So it's a really interesting
Yeah.
um, break of your mind. So anyway, what are we seeing here,
So
artists?
this one
And,
this
and,
one
and
is really this one is really interesting because this is called co-scientist and Google just released this as a research paper and also a private preview. So essentially, the folks that are building this agentic systems, they're building this, co-scientist that it's able to do scientific research today. So not just, things like information research like you see, but also very novel ideas around, deep science. And the idea here is that this co-scientist has a whole bunch of agents that are supervising. So he has a review agent, it has a generation agent, those ideas that get generated, re-ranking ideas, the evolution agent, meaning like how these ideas are evolving so it can keep track of all of that. So there's multiple agents in here, like metadata review or and proximity, and then it does all that research and idea tournaments and so on and so forth, and it's producing novel ideas based on that. And what's really exciting here is that it produced some outcomes that it hadn't seen before. And the blind comparison to actual research that was produced by humans, it was very, very close to that outcome. So what JC mentioning is that the acceleration of waiting in a lab for five years testing different components or testing different molecules or whatever type of research can now be accelerated tremendously, and now we can get to the outcomes a lot faster rather than waiting
Yeah.
for scientific discovery to happen over 5, 10, 20 years. We can do a lot of that a lot faster because we can have this work happen in parallel, and we can have AI do all of the all of that work that can take a really long time, like the research components.
Yeah. Hey, let's just stay one more minute here because there's two important points, and one comes
You really
from
like this, huh?
Craig. Well, I want to talk more about my PhD. No, Craig has a really interesting point that I just read on the chat room, and I want to connect it. But this is a scaffolding solution that we're seeing from Google that informs how many of these agentic systems will work. And we're kind of towards the tail end of what is agentic, so we can then put multiple of them working together. That's going to be our second part.
Yeah.
But Craig is
Yeah.
asking us, well, aren't we just shortchanging the process? Discounting the serendipity of the research process as job attributed to a lot of creativity and whatnot. So let's call these the secondary effects of this. Um, so my contribution to my field, 5 years later, one contribution. What happens is that me as a professional, the moment I left, I brought all this economic value with teams, creation, coaching, and whatnot. So from my point of view, Craig, the contribution to creativity and the knock secondary effects is that if I was able to achieve it took me 5 years in half of the time, I would have contributed more creatively, economically. The impact of my contribution as human will be very interesting. What happens if these methodologies allow you to do scientific research and experimentation
Yeah.
sooner?
Yeah.
Can we cure diseases faster? Can the
Yeah.
jobs, the 20,000 jobs to create the medicine or whatever scientific achievements we're gonna hit, go from 5, 10, 20 years to
Right.
months? And I think that's an important value added of the speed that this brings up. So yes, certain things will change, but the speed of deployment accelerates the secondary effects there.
Yeah. The one thing I want to kind of transition here, at least the way I think about it, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of concern in higher education with basic research funding that's happening in institutions, and higher education
Hmm.
traditionally, research universities have been, the beneficiaries of, they've been the engine of basic research, right? That's happening. And then that get materialized and they get kind of transformed and get put into market as well. Well, that basic research can be accelerated now and it can be done a lot faster. And kind of where like the question is like, where does that leave universities and the PhDs and all the folks that are doing this basic research? Like, can they be more productive, or do you really need all of that basic research to happen anymore when you can have, a one science, or you can have one of the scientists, or you can have one of the PhDs or one of the professors actually be able to now be much more productive and produce a lot more of that research without having a lab of 50 or 100 research assistants or graduate students. So it changes a lot of things, and that's kind of where we're talking about in higher education. But we focused a lot on the kind of the student experience, the productivity side, rather than like what's happening in the classroom. But Agentic really fits into a lot of these use cases, and we're really excited about that. So JC, let's talk about higher ed and how this kind of fits into higher ed specifically.
Because our domain and many of you come from the enrollment management space and student success, the example that we want to give you is in context to how you select an agentic system that bring impact, and how do you go about a sea of possibilities to narrow down to one or two. So think about, I have possibilities, but I want to do it through the lens of impact. And specifically, one of the things that we know is important for us in higher education is thinking about the time to value. So impact sometimes has to do with, is this doing this the right thing? So artists, this is something that we have been talking
Yeah,
about throughout some time, and it puts two types of technical ideologies at odds.
yeah.
A horizontal
Well,
AI versus vertical AI. You want to expand this idea?
yeah, but I want to get back to, so when you're talking about the prior slide, right? Or when we're talking
Sure.
about how do you pick how do you pick the age? Well, we've been asked as we've kind of worked with a lot of institutions before, it's like, hey, what are the tools? Like, which chatbot do I use? Do I use ChatGPT or do I use Perplexity or do I use Claude or do I use Gemini? And
Hmm.
that's kind of where we're stuck, essentially, right? And schools and companies are building some of their own internal technology. They're building some of their own internal chatbots because these horizontal ones or this general platforms, they're afraid about the data that goes in there, or how do you deploy, how do you give somebody $30 a month to your whole organization, right? How do you do that? And you still need a lot of effort in order to customize them. So that's what we've been talking about for the past 2 years. It's like, what do you choose? But the question now, where we're going with agentic AI, is that this capabilities are not going to be in the chat GPTs of the world. Yes, those are going to be generic solutions or generic AIs that you're going to use as assistants, but they're actually going to come down to the work and to the tools that you're using as part of your workflows. So the workflows that you have and that you're doing today are going to be agentic, and they're going to be affected by AI. So when JC says, like, this idea of horizontal AI versus vertical AI, well, chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, those are horizontal tools. They can be used for manufacturing. Some school
Hmm.
can use them, or we've seen like as ASU do it, or CSU kind of adopt it for all their students. But they need to build a lot of capabilities. They have to build all of the building blocks behind the scenes. They have to build all this stuff. And again, like you can take a platform like even Salesforce with Agentforce, right? You take horizontal software like an Excel spreadsheet, for example, and an Excel spreadsheet. It's the most ubiquitous kind of application out there today, and it gets used. Excel gets used for finance person can do amazing things with it, but then in the wrong hands, it's like I'm like, how the hell do I do this formulas, or like you come up with something that's very, very crude where you add a cell, add a cell, add a cell, where you can just use a formula. So the idea is that you have a platform that it's like building blocks, and that's the horizontal. It's like horizontal AI where it's Lego blocks. So you get all the pieces, but you have to put them all together. And that's tools like ChatGPT or Agentforce with Salesforce, that you have to put the use cases together for each individual industry, for each individual workflow. On the other side, with vertical AI, right? You think about a vertical soft piece of software, it's purpose built for that industry, right? And in this case, we actually like it when things are purpose built for higher education, because we understand and assume that there is a understanding of how higher education works, what our workflows are like, and then we get 99% out of the box functionality. We don't have to configure much. We don't have to put all that stuff together. All of that work that we had to do now goes away, and we can get into the value. So that's vertical AI. So you see here, it's like you can have a bunch of Legos, or you can have an assembled kind of use case, which is a city in this case. It's like you could have put all those pieces together, or you can just have it out of the box. And of course, the foundational, it's still Lego blocks in there, but in one case, you build it yourself. And use cases in the other case, you have to, like, it's already comes out as part of it, right?
Which is a great segue to what does it look like. So in the next 2, 3 minutes, we just want to give an example of vertical AI through the lens of agentic. And these are 6 agents that have been built on our element infrastructure. Mallory alluded to Ardis and I not only being thought leaders, but we're also in the trenches building
Yep.
and learning about how do we deploy this agent to help the need of student engagement. So what you start seeing is the strategist, the event manager, the admissions advisor, financial aid advisor,
Right.
career advisor, and of course, the athletic advisor. Start thinking about them as they always have a skill. They always have the possibility to come and do their domain
Collaborate.
expertise, right? Or collaborate. And perhaps, artists,
Yep.
this video is actually the best way to see how the orchestration between a campaign strategist with maybe a financial AI strategist or an admissions advisor will actually take place. So this video probably tells the
Yeah,
story.
yeah. So I mean, we can go very quickly through this. This is just something that We've like when we build this AI systems, we talked about chatbots before, and I don't know, can you go to the next slide, JC? Yeah, so this is we talked about like what's the difference between a general chatbot? In here, what you see is like you have different personas or different chatbots. They can have different skills, they can do different things, they can collaborate amongst each other, and essentially they use tools to do all this work. So this is an example of it. We show this a lot because we built it in Element, and it's something that we're really proud of. But now we're moving towards building more and more of these agents to do a lot more things, not just the chat with the student and doing that work, but we're actually building autonomous agents and autonomous that are actually proactively in the background doing that work and collaborating with folks, and sending messages out on their own and sending emails and kind of looking at the information that the student has and proactively reaching out. So what you're seeing here is essentially a manifestation of how these agents kind of work together, and kind of based on the personalities that they have and based on the information that they have, they work as teams. It could have been This conversation could have been just humans, right? Going back and forth around, hey, I need some help with financial aid. Well, I don't have that information. Let me ask my financial aid person. Speaking different languages, like those are the capabilities that this is an example of in Element today.
And the ability to basically leverage multilingual, multi
Yeah, yeah,
modalities that are already basically persistent in all our AI solutions, it's fantastic, right? So we could obviously replicate this with humans, but it would require, the advisor who speaks Spanish or English or French or whatever we need to have here.
exactly.
That's also a great possibility. And I hope you guys see how the collaboration environment takes place. So, artists,
Yep.
this is a great segue to basically introduce our second building block in the conversation. We've been talking about what
Yeah.
agentic looks like, and I hope all of you now understand it. Oh, it's about reasoning, adaptation, and acting, and how they can come and collaborate. But let's go deeper into this multi-agent collaboration, because the premise that we're going to come and build is that you're not talking about one or two agents, but potentially dozens or more. Somehow, when we
Oh
did
man, it's
this,
lunchtime.
you took me to taco land, and no pun intended, it's lunchtime. I'm a little hungry, so I'm craving this. Can you tell us why tacos are relevant here?
Yeah. So, one helpful way to kind of understand this evolution of the AI systems, like it's through this taco framework, like the agents, right? When you think about agents, and so taco, right? Delicious, of course. We're not sending you any tacos, so don't.
It doesn't
Sorry
have a
for
D.
not.
It doesn't have a D, so
Yeah.
you cannot say delicious. It starts with
Yeah.
T.
It starts with T. So you
There you
think
go,
about this
Caleb. Taco
AI.
Tuesday. Yeah.
Taco Tuesday. You think about this AI agents, and kind of this is the progression of kind of capabilities and how they work. You think about taskers. So these are taskers, just they're basic AI systems that complete specific narrow tasks that when instructed. So these are the simplest form of AI agents, right? They're very, very simple. You tell it, go add a note to this person's in the record. It does that. Go do this. Go do that. So those are the taskers. So think about them as different types or different flavors of agents. Now you move on from taskers to what are called assistants, and assistants provide more complex interactive support, right? So they often engage in conversation and help with broader range of activities in here. So they do more complex, more interactive support. Think about what we talked about around the financial aid, like asking and going in the system and grabbing things and so on and so forth, and doing that work. So those are the assistants. So you're collaborating. You can call them co-pilots, however you want to call them, but assistants basically go back and forth with you, and they do more complex work and go back and forth to accomplish. C, collaborators. Now, this flavor or this, you move on from assistants to collaborators, which really act like teammates in a workflow, right? So the collaborators function as true teammates in these workflows. It understands the context and contributing, it contributes meaningful to like a project. Think about those collaborators around the research projects. Those aren't assistants, right? Those are really collaborators that
Hmm.
understands what you need and then goes and does the research. Same thing from the on the element side, we build collaborators around campaign management. So it does a whole campaign. It kind of works through that. The next thing is really orchestrators. So orchestrators are agents that are coordinating multiple other agents. So these are agents that are coordinating other agents. Collaborators are just like a very smart teammate who can do really interesting things. Assistant is like an intern. Tasker is just like an automation tool, right? Assistants, again, as somebody who is coming in, and then orchestrators are coordinating multiple agents, and that's where things get really interesting, right? So you're managing complex workflows, and they ensure specialized agents work together. So they're breaking down the task, giving it, hey, this is person is really good for that, they're good for that. Similar to like writing a campaign, I need to call an email writer, I need to call an art assistant, I need to call a strategist to pull together the flow. I need to call, so all of those pieces. So that's how we think about these agents through the Taco framework. And there's a
So,
progression there. So when somebody asked the question before, what's the difference between a chatbot and an agent? It's like, well, no. There is a scalability on these agents and what they're able to do. So you can't look at it, through black and white or this versus that. There is a capability progression here.
so the story that we are actually painting here is that as you start thinking about agents and as AI assistants, they're not all created the same, right? And some of them could be orchestrators or collaborators, taskers. Artists just told us this. It's a natural layup to a parallel world of how we work today. So start thinking about the organizational structure as a parallel universe where there's humans doing what
Yeah.
humans do, and there's hierarchy. There's many of us, we run teams. Many of us are taskers. Many of us are orchestrators. Many of us are assistants. All that type of component. Now, the parallelism of it is that you could have assistants doing the same. And in this visual, what we're
Yeah.
trying to capture is that the new organizational design through the lens of AI agents is that I could have my human teams or I could have my AI assistant teams. And some of these could be the T of the tackle, just the tasker. Some of them could actually orchestrate, and you can have in this visual, you start seeing the
Yeah.
lead AI assistant, who is probably more the orchestrator, right? That O. And in this graphic, what we also try to capture one of the benefits is that on the left hand side, as we go through human teams, yeah, it's important to have them. Of course, we're always going to have humans. But on the right hand side, you can start saying, I have 100 or a dozen. And
Yeah.
there's a really interesting value proposition of scale that happens on the right hand side of this chart versus what we humans do on the left hand side. Artist, anything to add here?
Yeah. No, I think this is a really good example. So let's move forward. I think we're kind of we have a lot to unpack here, and
Yeah.
we're kind of running out of time. So
Now, to set you up for this one, artist, because I know this is something that you spoke about it, and I like your framework here. If I am basically building as per we're telling everyone in this conversation to do is there's going to be an agent. An agent can be in the multiples, and they could basically come and collaborate and do different things. How do they know that it's working for me? So we like to start having the conversation about ROI measuring success because let's go back to the parallel universe. On the human systems, when we have human teams, we sometimes understand how we humans contribute to work and how we onboard, and we're going to have all that conversation. But there is a rubric for human engineering that is, in a way, been around for, I don't know, 100 years of or professional
yeah.
organization, organizational design. But what about looking at success through the lens of agents? So you've been thinking about this problem, and I think you have a nice framework here.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about adopting AI, it's like we forget about like how are we going to think about it in comparison to what we're doing today, and what's the framework. And this is for leaders out there, and this is for those again, presidents or VPs or whoever is thinking about this. And you think about in there's three different frameworks. You can look at it from kind of a performance comparison framework, which measures AI accuracy against the human accuracy. So volume and scale capabilities, and then the time to completion. So it looks at those things. So for example, an AI system can achieve 95% of the quality of a human written email, but produces 10 times the volume in 1/5 the time. So can you live with 95% accuracy, but with much more volume and 1/5 the time? And that's how you measure it against. That's a framework that you can think about against a human. Can you, like, if your task requires 100% accuracy, then perhaps you don't want to adopt that use case of it, right? So that's how you think about it. The financial outcome framework focuses on cost saving, productivity gains, and kind of revenue generation, right? So for example, implementing the campaign manager system, we reduced campaign development costs by 60% while increasing yield by 15%. That's how you think about that. It's kind of a financial outcome framework, both from a reducing cost of how long it takes or how much time it takes to do something, and then what is the outcome, kind of the revenue generation or the increase that you see there. The last one, which is the more interesting one, and something that once you have adopted a few of these, agents or a few of these workflows into your organization or institution, you think about it through the organizational impact framework, and that looks at recalibrating productivity metrics, enhanced capabilities, and new possibilities that weren't previously feasible, right? So now AI can do things, or with AI, you can do things and set the bar and KPIs move higher. So, in this case, for example, like we're now able to run 24 targeted campaigns per year instead of 6 with greater personalization. So you weren't able to do that before, and now you're able to do that. So the bar has risen, and that's how you measure it. The ability of new capabilities, new possibilities that you weren't able. And this is where we try to focus on personalizing engagement and outreach with students, with thousands of students at the personal level with just that one. You can't personalize it at that one-to-one level. We just don't have the
Correct.
staff. But now this is the impact of what AI can do is you can now do personalization at scale with just, at the individual student level.
Yeah, Todd has an interesting point though. You can start including things such as technical debt when measuring success, and that's when the application of agents probably come into writing code and things of that sort. So these type of frameworks will evolve, and they're in a way
Right.
dynamically changing with the evolution maturity the agents have. So in this case,
Yep.
performance comparison, financial outcomes, organizational impact, in a way capture this maturity 101 of agents. But the conversation from 5 years from now, probably Tim, to your point, and everyone else thinking, there will be more sophisticated, granular, domain-specific ROI metrics that get deployed. Uh, Now,
This is
there's
where
a
this becomes
ton
fun, right? It's like,
there's a ton of details that we went into episode 2. Please go there specifically on challenges. We painting a fantastic rosy picture, but we also agnostic that they are really fun and important things to address. All
yep,
things on episode 2.
yep,
Now,
and adoption.
what
Yep.
Ardis and I like to do to wrap it up is to start painting the picture of the next 5 years. Please know that this is not the next 50 years. It's literally happening today as we speak. So how we start thinking about us as managers and leaders and preparedness for the teams that we run, the companies that we run towards this angle construct called the AI workforce. Everybody, yes, the technology is fantastic. There are things that it does fantastically, and there are things that it's needing to improve. But it's important for us to know how to prepare for it. So we're going to talk a little bit about skilling and how on aggregate we're starting to reflect in a way futuristic way. So this quote has shaped us, right? And Ardis and I did a whole episode on the 3 observations from Sam Altman. Sam Altman, the CEO and founder of OpenAI, and one of the most important thought leaders in how AGI will look like and when it will come us. But Ardis, the 2 main points here, it's that there's
Yeah.
the emergence of a co-worker, a virtual co-worker, and the magnitude. I said a dozen. In this case, this leader is saying 1,000. You
Yeah.
you just recently told me that someone said it is the co-worker, right? Is that team that it's so important. So can you
Yeah.
expand on this exchange and how people are reacting to these quotes?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's like the capabilities of these agents, it's now at that junior level, junior virtual coworker. So you don't have a PhD coworker yet, but imagine you have a 1,000 or 1,000,000 of these, and you can do a lot of work, and they can produce a lot of research for you, and they can do a lot of the tasks for you. So, and then it can affect really the knowledge work. We talked about your research on the institution side, right? Having a lot of research assistants, and they might not be the smartest right now today, but eventually they will be. So that's the idea here, is that you have a lot of them, and they actually like the level of knowledge work they're going to be able to do is going to increase. And when we look at this, you see if you go, so again, this is really, really important, but think about it in a way where um, we're not necessarily replacing humans, but like we have what you mentioned before is that as I was talking to a leader, a president, the aha moment became clear. And he's like, oh, this is great because now everybody in my team or everybody in your team, as we're talking to one of the VPs, can have their own assistants, right? They can have their own team. They can do emails, they can do research, they can support their student, they can reach out to that student proactively, and they can do all these different things. So the light bulb came on, right? Where the individual human now had an AI team that can do the work or the menial work.
Yeah. Um, a human at the center means to me
Yeah,
that reasoning and the components that makes agentic AI thrive require that incentive or reinforcement. Actually, the techniques are around reinforcement learning, that this is the right thing for me, my operation, my context. And this is
yeah,
where you start seeing the enhancement of productivity. Um, Artists, humans are not replaced. They're actually
yes,
shifting to new roles. And Tom has a really interesting point on the chat that talks about compensation. And as we start thinking about that shift, I
yeah.
am now managing 10 people, and tomorrow I'm going to be managing 5 people, but I don't know, at 1,212 agents. My shift in thinking and preparedness needs to evolve with that.
Yeah. It's based on results, right? And the question is around results and outcomes rather than like how busy you are or how much time. The hourly rate is now completely blown out of the window when you think about a
Hmm.
writer or somebody like that's able to
Exactly.
produce 10 times the work for like half of the time. So that whole philosophy of my value is based on the time that I'm putting in to put a widget together, like that is gone out the window. It's about the knowledge work and the output that you're giving and the value that you're generating for your institution or for the organization or whatever. That's how you measure it, and that's going to be accelerating even more now when we are able to amplify the work that we do as part of that impact. So that goes back to it's like don't be left behind, right? It's like just the AI 57% of AI tasks are augmenting people. So we can do more and we can provide better output and more better outcome.
An important stat because, and for those of you who are not familiar with this stat, it comes from observing millions of conversations in Anthropic via their Claude chatbot that
Yeah.
the API calls. So think about us humans, like consumers using it, and not mostly businesses. And what this tells us is the majority of the tasks, 57%, are augmenting you as opposed to automating the human,
Yeah.
aka replacing the human. That's a really important construct because it allows us to understand that in the future, this collaboration, it's where it's at. So if 20 years ago, we said that kind of, transcultural skills was very important because the world is no longer flat and
Yeah.
whatnot. Now we're
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about a world that introduces technology. So in this chart on the left hand side, you start seeing that 47% of the tasks are being done by humans. But as we project out 5 years from now, you see that reducing to 33%, indicating that the combination of human and technology is taking two-thirds of that, 66%, 67% of the work. This data comes from the World Economic Forum as they try to paint a picture of the next 5 years. Remember, 5 years, this is not 20, 30, or 50 years, and how the skills the shift in professions and skills will also emerge.
Yeah, exactly. That's an eye chart, by the way. Sorry for.
Oh, I have
Uh,
even a better one for that. So, but take us to
oh man,
24/7
come on.
artists.
I mean, look, the expectation is changing, right? It's that these tasks, like the consumer is changing. They're expecting somebody to be available 24/7, and the work expectations are changing. So AI to the rescue. Like we put AI after 5 or whatever, and that's becoming the first steps where AI runs 24/7, humans don't. We need clear, like we really need clear boundaries. Those boundaries are being defined right now by,
Hmm.
hey, when do we introduce an AI? Where do we introduce AI as part of workflows that are happening in the background? Or when there is no human, that's the first line of defense, and then kind of pass it on to humans so they can do the more advanced kind of troubleshooting or the more advanced kind of reasoning and connection with the student, right? The kind of handling those problems rather than just getting these questions all the time about like when is the library open or when is the cafeteria open or when is this the gym open and so on and so forth. So that's completely changing. But the expectation is that somebody needs to be available 24/7 as the consumer is changing that expectation.
And as we deal with a new generation that's digitally native, right? These expectations are core to
Well,
the
AI native, I think
DNA,
that's called
right?
AI native now. So,
Right.
right? So we
So
need to
AI
change
native,
that.
right? And in a
Yeah.
way, yeah, of course, it's
Well,
troublesome, but
workers, if
reacting to
if you
that.
think about it, if you think about like the folks who are coming into the workforce today, they started with ChatGPT in 2022. So it's like over the next year, folks like that
Mhm.
they grew up or they went to college with that. So they're entering the workforce, and it's like, yeah, of course I know how to use these tools. I've been using it for the past 3, 4 years. So it's
Look,
like we can't.
at least twice a week, I read a story for to my kids that is actually generative AI. So it's just embedded, and this 27
Yeah.
24/7 expectation runs systemically. Uh,
So well, lots to cover, JC, where I think we're running
let's
way
yeah.
late. So we have 8 more minutes.
All right. So work and trust accountability. Look, there will be mistakes, and thinking about how accountability gets passed to AI, it's one of the emergent tasks here. Art, is anything to add on this one?
Nope. Let's move it forward.
Now, I think this is a really exciting one because it starts depicting the idea that a hiring skill, AI readiness, AI specialist, is up and coming or is here now. We keep on hearing, of course, that the IT will play a major role, a bigger role in workforce management. So, Artists, I know you've been experiencing a lot of this and you manage, a ton of technical teams. Anything to add on the hiring of AI specialists as I prepare
Yeah,
my busy chart?
you need to think about like folks who are understanding how to wire things together and how to think about processes. It's about systems thinking. It's about processing. Like how that's how you incorporate a lot of those things in there. And of course, the famous quote from Jansen Wegg as part of an interview is like, "IT will become the HR of AI agents." Maybe HR will become the IT because as you write job descriptions and kind of embed in how these people or how these agents are supposed to work, HR is really set up to do that, or people operations or whatever. So that becomes really, really interesting on how you think about where the delineation of job descriptions or
Yeah.
tasks or workflows are being embedded.
In this chart, what you'll start seeing is a bit of the cataloging based on data of how our skills will emerge. So think about on the bottom chart, I'm just going to give you some highlights and I'll explain it. Critical thinking, writing, programming, troubleshooting are the new skills that emerge as we become AI readiness. Now, this very, very busy chart, what tries to tell the story is that there's some fields that will compressed, in this case, being multilingual. Unfortunately, being a global citizen, thinking about marketing and media will not have the expansion that something like technical literacy, critical thinking, I've already mentioned it, curiosity, leadership and social influence, talent management, analytical thinking will be in the next 5 years. These details are part of the World Economic Forum 2025 World Report, and I recommend all of you to download it and read it. Artists, I'm gonna let you do this one of my favorite ones.
From assistants to coworkers. So AI coworkers, they really require onboarding, management, training. Very, very, very similar to how we think about performance management today, or like how do we know what somebody like we need to train someone to say, hey, this is kind of the job, this is job requirements, but also you need onboarding, you need to understand the systems, you need to understand the context, providing access to all the data, and then as they go along, you need to evaluate the outputs and the outcomes. And we have what we call evals around this and other things that we talk about internally in terms of like the technical components. But it's very, very similar to how a human coworker
Of
would
course.
work as well. You're evaluating that as well with the training and continuous training as well.
It's highly illogical or crazy to expect a human to start a team and hit the ground running without proper onboarding and basically training to be successful. Similarly,
Yeah.
AI assistants will need that. So
Yeah.
this brings us to the conclusion, so we can then give you a quick recap. We have about 5 minutes, and then where do we go next from here? But the punchline here, everybody, is as we start thinking about the evolution of a new type of AI, agentic, how it gives us this multiplicative component of dozens of thousands of agents collaborating, then dictating this new AI workforce, is that we humans become this collaborator unit. We need to stem and be very good at project management because the new work organization depends on it and requires it, right? Rather than just basically hands on a task and moving one widget to another, right? This is a really interesting outset of what the future looks like that is being enabled and accelerated by this new type of AI. Artists,
I love it. So everybody becomes a manager. You have your own team. So everybody gets their own team of AI assistants or agents to do their work. So now you start thinking about how do you pull things together, and how do you do project management, and how you organize work, how do you collaborate your human peers, and so on and so forth. It's you're moving from individual contributor to manager. And again, the punchline here is
AI doesn't replace
AI
us.
doesn't replace us. It amplifies us, right? Isn't everybody's idea to move forward and to go through like to move up the rank, right? To move up the scale, and like you become a manager, and then you become a manager of more people and more people. So that's kind of the idea here. Well, now everybody can become managers, right? And they can do the work.
If you have questions, please bring them along. As we recap, there are 5 takeaways, and please bring your conversation here. We have a few minutes to wrap up, but as we think about this, agentic AI as teammates, our conversation today is that we are shifting from AI tools to just not tools alone, by teammates, and that represents a
Yeah.
fundamental change on how
Yeah.
we're going to leverage artificial intelligence.
Vertical solutions with domain expertise in order to get fast adoption right now and incorporate them into they have to be in your workflow. So they have to understand how you work. So it's AI that's going to be in your tools today, and not necessarily the assistants that are going to be generic, horizontal for every industry, right? So think about AI in your tools today.
But it's multiple of them, right? Multiple agents will be our solution for scalability. They will mirror how we work as teams, right? But also create their new systems and operate somewhat independently so we can tackle scale and address these complex challenges.
That's right.
To
And
more,
of course, the evolving human roles is going to change. So as AI takes more of that routine task, human roles evolve towards what we just talked about, orchestration and application of unique human skills. Um, and I'll do the last one, technical culture change. This is I kind of stole this one as well. We're trying to move really
it's
quick. We
fine.
have two more
You're the
minutes.
you're the culture czar. Go for it.
I wanted to make a point. So, successful implementation of this agentic system is going to require both technical integration and cultural transformation with the orgs. I think a lot of the questions that are in the chat right now are coming up. Well, how do I make my organization do this, or how do I kind of change minds? And in the next slide, we actually have it's not just the technology adoption, right? Sometimes it's kind of digital transformation and how you think about those workflows and how you think about them a little bit differently. It's a little bit of a mind shift. We're not going to go through all of these right now, but we'll kind of leave them as a punchline here. So essentially, start small but think big. Identify high impact use cases today. Kind of assess if you have the technical infrastructure, meaning do you need to buy new tools? Do you have the data that do you need, and so on and so forth. Start building internal knowledge, right? So if you're the ones who's experimenting with it, probably other people in the organization are experimenting with that stuff as well, or there's knowledge around it. So educate and train your teams. And of course, this is a call to action for leaders as well as individual contributors as well, right? So evaluate existing technology, educate and train your teams, and then implement initial deployments, right? So begin by developing specialized AI agents, or you can acquire and integrate them, things like Element 451, like we're doing a lot of these AI agents with our Bolt AI engine. So you can deploy them independently and then think about the success metrics. And then last but not least, expand on them, right? So think big. It's like work on what's working really well. And then think about multi-agent workflows to scale those deployments to additional departments and integrate other systems in kind of your institution. So I think we did
Our
it.
conversation. Concludes our conversation. We did it just probably 1 minute over. Thank you, Mallory. And remember, everybody, this is a summary with, I guess, conversational aspects from 3 podcasts that we did. Thank you so much, and let this agentic AI journey begin for you.
Till next time. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.